Welcome to Shauns Take, brought to you by the Keystone Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Shaun and Jim.
Hello and welcome to Shauns Take, brought to you by the Keystone Sports Network. I'm Jim Galante. He is Shaun Gold. Shaun, how we doing this week?
Doing well. Another week, some good sports conversations to come. So always excited about that.
It is, and what I love, Shaun, is when we get a chance to spread out, talk about multiple sports. This week we've got baseball, we've got basketball, we've got football, so we've got a little bit of everything. How about we start with the NBA though, and the finals? It's Oklahoma City up now 3 games to 2. They took a game, they protected their home court to go up 3 games to 2, Shaun.
Well, I'd like to start this segment off by giving both fan bases, obviously, the Thunder fans know why they should be excited right now, but by giving both fan bases reasons why your team can win the NBA Finals still. Now, we'll get the Thunder out of the way. We know how dominant they are, we know how deep they are. Thunder fans, you got to think you can close this thing up in 6, if not win at your home court in game 7. Reason being because the Thunder just do not let you breathe at all. They just squeeze you the entire 4 quarters, and when push comes to shove and a game's going down the line, if they have a lead, they're not giving it up. And I know that's what they did in game 1. It seems like they learned from their lessons, but if we look back to game 5, Indiana made a run and looked like we were going to get a repeat of game 1, and then OKC just turned on the gear and showed that when push comes to shove, SGA, J-Dub, their guys are going to get a bucket when you need it, and they're going to win you a game. Now, if we flip over to the Indiana Pacers, the reason that you should be excited and optimistic right now, Pacer fans, is if you look back to game 5, the turnover margin, 23 turnovers for Indiana, 11 for OKC. I have to think if you don't have 23 turnovers and you're the Pacers in that game, you might complete that comeback and win a game and be up 3-2 right now heading back to Indiana. So if you're a Pacer fan, just know if the Indiana Pacers cut back on turnovers, they would be up in this series right now and be ready to shock the world going into this. That's not the case, but it shows me that if they tighten up the screws back home at Indiana, they can win game 6 and then go into game 7 at OKC feeling very good about their chances to pull off a shocking upset. So Thunder fans, you know you're the more dominant team. You know if OKC plays their best basketball, they are going to be winning the NBA Finals. Indiana Pacer fans, you guys now know if you clean some things up and catch the Thunder off guard at all, it can just be 1 quarter of the Thunder not playing great basketball, you have a shot at pulling off back-to-back upsets and becoming NBA champions. So, Jim, I wanted to give both fan bases a little something to be excited about with this one. Look, I think the Thunders are I think they're gonna take it, but there is a world in which the Indiana Pacers, if they clean some things up and catch OKC lacking in both of these games for it just needs to be about 7 minutes at a time in both games. If there's a chunk where they can go on a 12-2 run or something at the right time in the game, the Pacers could very well end up winning the finals. So both fan bases, be excited. I'm hoping it goes to 7, Jim, so we get some more great basketball.
There's Shaun telling us hope is a good thing for the Pacer fans. And before this series started, we both thought this was time for the Thunder. OKC was going to win it. It still appears that way, but I'll tell you what, after a couple games, this just felt like a 7 game series type of deal. If you're a Pacers fan, I think you've got to feel pretty good in that game 6 back at home. Uh, I haven't seen the spread yet, but I think if I had to take someone, I'm going to probably take the Pacers in that game 6. OKC back home game 7. But you're right. If you're a Pacer fan, you've got to look at this and still say, hey, if we could just push this to a game 7, who knows what could happen in a single game. That's the hope that you have as a Pacer fan. I also want to point out before this series started, the other thing you and I talked about is would the fans be tuned in for this game for this series, Shaun? And unfortunately, the numbers show our concern was legitimate. The number of fans tuning in on TV, it is down like almost 50% from just a couple years ago. And I think the only championship series that had lower ratings was the COVID year, and which is not a surprise. So I I hope that fans will still recognize that with just one or two games left, hey, this is not a bad series. It's pretty entertaining. I hope more fans will tune in for these last couple games.
I completely agree. And, it's funny because last year's Celtics Mavericks finals was not nearly as exciting as this finals. So, I know it's hard with small markets, but I guess I wish the NBA did a better job of blowing these teams up when they were playing really good, both in the regular season and throughout the postseason, to get people to tune in, because this genuinely has been some of the best basketball I've watched all year. The comebacks, the superstars. You have every storyline you could want, except for New York, LA, Boston, or Chicago being in it, probably. But it's great basketball, so I do encourage everyone. Game 6 should be great, and if there is a Game 7, we know Game 7s are always exciting.
Unfortunately, Sean, the reality is folks want those big names, and maybe it just takes a couple years. It, maybe next year or the year after, the Thunder will be a big name team. Usually it happens in the big markets, the Lakers, the Celtics, the Bulls, but we also had, the Golden State Warriors become a national team, national names, which leads to your point about promoting these players on these very good teams that just happen to be from a smaller market, Sean.
100%. And I think we've covered the finals, everyone watching, but we got to go over to the MLB. And it's not about, who's winning, who's losing right now, but it's more about a blockbuster trade that ended up happening out of seemingly nowhere. There were reports that we know the trade I'm talking about, Rafael Devers going to the Giants. We know there were rumblings of tensions building. He didn't want to play first base. He was playing DH. He wanted to stay at third. There was a lot of drama brewing, and eventually Boston said, enough's enough. We no longer want you in our clubhouse. Well, Jim, it wasn't exactly, at least perceived to be, a fair, even trade with giving up a young superstar. I know there was some drama there, but Devers is still a young superstar with 8 years left on a contract for guys who just don't seem to live up to the name of Rafael Devers. So, what were your initial thoughts, and who wins this trade in the long run, the Red Sox or the Giants here?
The it seems like the obvious answer would be the Giants. As you said, they got a star who could put up big numbers for uh, not very much. And I'm one of those uh, baseball fans. I'll look deep. You know what? Hey, minor league talent is valuable. Just a few years ago, and I'm going off topic here a little bit, but the Mets in a midseason trade, they brought in Javi Baez, and they gave up a young minor league player. What was his name? Oh yeah, Pete Crow Armstrong. For a couple months of Javi Baez, the Cubs now have a young superstar MVP candidate. Now, I'm a hardcore Mets fan. When that trade happened, most people didn't know who Pete Crow Armstrong was. I did. Back then, he went by Peter Crow Armstrong. I saw him play a couple spring training games. Loved his swing. I was upset when they made that deal. Other people were like, "Oh, you just gave up, a minor leaguer, and not a big deal." These players, the minor leaguers that the Giants gave up, there's no Pete Crow Armstrong in this group, Sean. Okay, so on the surface, it appears the Giants have won the trade. But I'm going to go just a little bit deeper. You've got a guy who has been a problem in the clubhouse. He refused to move off third base. He then didn't, he opening at first base. The team needed him there. He refused to play there. I get the feeling that this is a bit of addition by subtraction for the Red Sox. They also offloaded a huge contract. I believe he's still due $200 million over the next 8 year, probably even more than that. I'm sorry, 200 over $250 million he's due over the next 8 years. This is a guy who they moved him off third base because he's not a good third baseman. He's led the league in errors pretty much every year, and I know errors aren't the perfect measurement of defense for a player, but it's an indicator. And his range, everything was not good defensively. What the Giants brought in, it was essentially a DH only. Okay, but and I know I'm playing both sides here, Sean, but I'm wondering if for the Red Sox, it's look, we need to get him out of the clubhouse. We have a lot of good young players, players that we could bring up now and prosper without him there. I think the question of who wins this will be how will the Red Sox take that opportunity? That's a $250 million contract over the next 8 years. What do they do with that money that they freed up? Are they going to invest in a star player after the season in free agency, Sean?
I think that they need to after this, and it's kind of funny because Boston had a rocky start to the year, but they're only 6.5 games back from the Yankees, and at this point in the season, that's not that much. We have so much baseball left to play, and they're finally getting into a groove. And it was right after a big win that they trade, essentially on paper, who's still their best player, at least their best hitter in the lineup right now. And the drama is definitely warranted, and I think it's a good move for the Red Sox to get him out. I'm just confused on the return here. And like you said, there's no Pete Crow Armstrong, coming back in this deal, and you're getting like Jordan Hicks, who's an aging pitcher that's likely not going to be a Boston Red Sox for a super long time. So I think financially it makes sense for them, but I got to think there would have been a better offer out there if they really started shopping. And I think there were 4 or 5 teams. I know the Braves were a team that, made an inquiry about him, but it just seems kind of like the Luka Doncic trade. You could have gotten more if you tried to. And so I think Boston may have been a little too short-sighted on this one. I think it's good for them to have him out of the clubhouse because it clearly was not working. But I think in terms of talent in and talent out, the Giants will win this trade. And what I think is, to Devers' credit, kind of impressive is that with everything that seemed to be going wrong and with how frustrated I'm sure he was there, it seemed like he was the problem with most of this. But let's say, from his perspective, the Red Sox were the ones who weren't accommodating and weren't treating him right. He was still hitting very well at the plate. We see a lot of times when guys get frustrated, their production really tanks. He was still being a very good DH this year. And I have to think if he's now happy in San Francisco, his better mood may only elevate his play even more. And I like the move a lot for the Giants as long as they keep him happy and everybody clicks and he's a good fit in the organization. I think it pays off for them because they're playing great baseball. And, we saw them miss on Aaron Judge. We saw them miss on Shohei Ohtani. They've been waiting for that superstar to come. And Rafael Devers is not Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani, but he is kind of a level 2 star in the MLB right now. And at his age, he's got a lot of years of good production left. So I think this was a move that the Giants should be very happy that they made, and I think they will capitalize off of this trade.
That's a very good point, and I'm glad you made it. That from the Giants' perspective, they have had trouble bringing in the big names. So bring this guy in, and I think that the Giants are a good franchise financially. They're in these; they could withstand that contract. I'm not crazy about giving that kind of money that many years to a DH only type player, but if there's some place it makes sense, it's San Francisco. And again, that's a team that's uh, I'm, I was going to use the word struggling. That's not the right word because they're playing well, but they're in such a competitive division with the Padres, with the Dodgers, and even the Diamondbacks that this is the kind of move they need to make to stay relevant. And also, you bring up the Doncic comparison. I think that's also a good one in that you didn't get fair compensation for a star player. And the logic is, why didn't you shop him more? You probably could have gotten more talent. I'm assuming the risk was having this drag out for a while are you going to have a very unhappy player in your clubhouse and have to deal with that and its effect on the younger player? And there's a lot of young, talented players on the Red Sox. All right, Sean, let's shift gears again. Let's hit our favorite topic. Let's hit some college football. And in some off the field news, the long talked about House Settlement finally came to fruition, Sean, last week. We didn't get a chance to talk about it. I saw somewhere one of the athletic directors said this is one of the three biggest moments in college sports, along with the NCAA's formation, which was like 120 years ago, Title IX, which happened in the early 70s, and now the House Settlement.
It is a very big deal, and I'll let you dive a little bit more into the logistics of it because I know you understand it a bit more than I do. My surface level, if you will, of what this means is, one, I think it's necessary. The rev share and everything. There's way too much money in going into this, and college athletes put in way too much time for these programs to not be compensated for something. And I get there's still the people who, it's not professional sports for a reason. You're going there for school and everything like that. I get it, but you put in way too much time and effort. You put your body on the line, you put your health on the line for this. You deserve some of these, this revenue share when the NCAA is bringing in billions of dollars off of these players' names every single year. So it's another step in the NIL, era that needed to happen, and I think it will be good. Now, I think it's a good thing it happened. Does that mean just like NIL, it's not going to come with some baggage? 100%. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, and maybe that's something that you can talk about a little bit more. But I'm assuming there's going to be some major hiccups along the way in this too. Where is the money being distributed fairly? Is this ethical? All these questions that come up with NIL as well, and I think that's going to be something that it's going to take a couple years, just like NIL has, to smooth out and get into a good flow of things. But overall, I think it's good. I think it's necessary, but I do think there's going to be trouble along the way in this.
I agree. This is not the end of this discussion. It's the end of the beginning, or maybe the beginning of the end. Okay, the beginning of that process of where we're eventually going to get. I think that there's still the open question of, will these athletes be employees? Will there be collective bargaining? I think that will happen eventually, and they're going to have some growing pains to get there. Some of it, lawsuits are going to come. The money, and I don't have an issue with the money, not just because of the time the players put in. I don't have a problem with the money because of the money that's being generated by the players. You have a situation, you know, I don't care how hard you work, Sean, but if no one's willing to pay for your efforts, it's all for naught. Well, guess what? The efforts that specifically college football players put in has paid off with revenues in the billions of dollars. So, where should that money go? And should it only go to administrators and coaches? No, the players are the guys who are out there. We do not pay to see Nick Saban play. We're paying to see Arch Manning. We're paying to see the players on the field, so they deserve their cut to it. This is going to lead to, I mentioned, Title IX, and there's going to be, it's going to go to the courts. It will. Why aren't women, based on Title IX, getting as much money as the men? I'll let you in on a little secret, Sean, just between you and I, okay? They don't bring in the revenue. And it has nothing to do men and women. It's the same thing. Men's golf doesn't bring in the revenue. They're not going to get the money. The football players first, men's basketball second. Will there be some exceptions? Will there be there's some programs some schools that have great wrestling. Will Oklahoma, with their women's softball, which is very popular, will they spend money that way? more power to them. But this is where the revenue comes from. And the other point I want to make on this, Sean, is I had on our Keystone Kickoff show this week Andy Frank, who is the general manager of Penn State football. And we were talking about this. And as he was talking about how, I asked them how within the team itself they'll be paid, because I said there's other schools other than Penn State that seem to be giving out those big contracts more so than Penn State. And his response was interesting. It's like, look, there is that amount of money, and trust me, we are going to be spending it. How we do may be different than the next school. We will value things like retention, veteran players, their contribution, but that's where, boy, does that not sound like an NFL general manager, where you have, you know, money to spend and you have to determine how you're going to distribute it. And it might seem like a good idea in the beginning. There's that 5-star quarterback coming out of high school. I'm going to give him a big chunk of that money, and that's going to turn our program around. Oops. May not necessarily be the case, Sean. So, how you spend the money might be as important as how much you spend.
I completely agree with that. And like you just said, that 5-star quarterback coming out of high school, how many times have we seen a big deal get landed and the talent not equal what the potential was? I would be more comfortable. And of course, you want the best recruiting class. Top recruiting classes do correlate a lot with the success you have as a program, but the transfer portal does change a lot of that. So, would you rather go pay $5 million to a quarterback who was very, very good at a, let's say, a school like UNLV or Hawaii or Boise State, who's now, hey, you're ready to take on, a Power Four conference, versus a 16, 17-year-old coming out of high school saying, I want $5 million, and I've never played, anyone close to a grown man. I've played against high schoolers my whole life. So, I think that the transfer portal with this gets even more important for teams to hit on proven talent and give your money to proven players instead of players purely based off of potential. And then I want to go back to another point you said at the very beginning here, is how the players make the money for the NCAA. And people who are upset about players now getting compensated more because of that, just look at, and I get, I guess you could go back to the argument, well, this isn't professional sports, but as the NFL and the NBA bring in more money, who gets the raises in that? The players. The salary cap increases as the league revenue increases. That's how it should be. Yes, owners, coaches, all the parties involved make more, but the leagues make sure that the players get compensated more as time goes on, as TV deals get bigger, as the league brings in more money. It's no different for this. The players are the ones driving the revenue. If it weren't for players, like you said, we're not going to watch a bunch of coaches walk around on the sideline. We're watching them because of the players there. And college football is really the only sport where coaches make significantly more than the players make. And I get it. They're important, and they're also, a little bit more of developmental figures at that point of, life stages than professional coaches are. But we're watching for the players. The players are what run the whole entire thing. So they should be the ones getting, the compensation for that and getting the rewards for that. And as more money comes in, players should get more. And I don't think there's that much of an argument to make off of that fact right there.
I also want to address, Sean, the fans' reaction to this. As you mentioned, this, gee, the game's not the same. I miss the days when they played for the love of the sport and they were amateurs. And blah blah blah. Do you know what? The game has not changed because a player is getting paid. There's some other things. If you want to complain about the teams moving conferences, the conferences, the SEC pulling in Texas and Oklahoma, the Big Ten essentially to blame for the ruination of the Pac 12. Okay, fine. Those are the villains in my mind. But for the players, you know what? The game is still the same. And in effect, now schools have this now extra $20 million burden that is going to the student athletes, and they're looking for sources of revenue. But what's interesting to me is often their need for more money has kind of coincided with what we as fans are looking for. We went from the 4-team playoff to 12. The schools are doing that because there's increased revenue by doing it. But guess what, Sean? We get a better playoff system. You could bitch about Alabama not making it and Indiana did. I'm sorry, that's a bogus argument. When you lose to Vanderbilt, don't come crying about not making the playoffs. I segue there. But here's the reality. We are getting this 12-team playoff, which is exciting and it's great. I think we're also getting more parity because teams can now come up with this money, can be competitive. Gee, Jim, doesn't that ruin the parity that we used to have? We never had parity. We always had teams that dominated. Just go to the last decade. It was always Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson. Now we have more teams making the playoff. We have more teams. Look, my take on it, Sean,
Keystone
going into the
Sports
25
Network.
season, there's maybe 8 to 10 teams that I could realistically see winning the national championship. A few years ago, I would have said 3 teams.
I completely agree with that. And for the love of the game argument there too, I hope everybody realizes just because there's money involved, believe me, you still have to love playing football if you're going to play at a Division I college football level. The time commitment you put in, and I get it, if you're making millions, it's a little different and you're more willing to put up with something you dislike, but you put in way too much time. You live at your facility to not enjoy playing football. So I don't want to hear, oh, these guys don't even enjoy playing, that it's not for the love of the game. To get to that level and the talent that they have, you have to love football. At some point, you have to have loved football. And
And
they still do, even though they're getting paid.
my final note on that topic is the national championship the last couple of years went to Michigan and Ohio State, with both teams had multiple players who could have declared for the draft, gone on to play in the NFL, play on Sundays. They chose to return. The program I'm close to, Penn State, guess what? The reason why hopes are so high for this team coming this year, Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Denai Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant. These are all players who could be playing on Sundays. They chose to come back, Sean. Yes, they're going to get paid and compensated, but that's where they want to be in Happy Valley this year. All right, Sean, that's going to be the last word. I didn't mean to steal that from you, but hey, that's the way it falls sometimes. Thank you all for tuning in to Shauns Take. Make sure you join us again next week.
Keystone Sports Network.